Boris Johnson insisted yesterday he is still very optimistic about securing a Brexit trade deal by the end of the year. The Prime Minister admitted we simply can't compromise in certain issues, amid a deadlock over fishing rights and competition rules. EU chief negotiator Michel Barnier had earlier accused Britain's negotiating team of scuppering the chances of a deal by refusing to move closer to the EU's position. He claimed a trade deal is at this point unlikely. But the PM's chief negotiator David Frost insisted an agreement was still possible by the end of September. The UK has ruled out extending the December deadline to reach a deal. Mr. Johnson said yesterday, "Well, I think there's every reason for us to be very optimistic about getting a deal. I am very hopeful that we will get a deal. But I think, as our chief negotiator David Frost said, there are some things that we simply can't compromise over. People understand the arguments about the level playing field, about fisheries. And there's no point in leaving the EU if you remain in the pull of the EU and you are unable to do things differently. Everybody understands that. The EU also understands that. Michel also understands that." Mr. Frost said differences on access to fishing waters remain substantial and said the lack of progress means no deal preparations must be ramped up. Mr. Barnier described the UK's position on fisheries as simply unacceptable. Brussels has demanded status quo access to UK waters, which would essentially mean a continuation of the common fisheries policy. Mr. Johnson added, "On fisheries, let's be absolutely clear. They've looked at the full implications of what we are saying and I think they are thinking, my goodness, that's quite a tall order. But actually it's the right thing for the UK. In the early 1970s we basically handed over control of our fisheries. We gave up our fisheries in a way that permanently disadvantaged UK fishers. Now is the time to change that back. I am sure there's a good deal." Mr. Frost said yesterday, "We have always been clear that our principles in these areas are not simple negotiating positions but expressions of the reality that we will be a fully independent country at the end of the transition period. That is why we continue to look for a deal with, at its core, a free trade agreement similar to the one the EU already has with Canada. That is, an agreement based on existing precedents. We remain unclear why this is so difficult for the EU, but we will continue to negotiate with this in mind."